How many of you are vegans or vegetarians here? So 1, 2. Okay, I put this slide up specifically for that reason. You know, Billy Joel is one of my icons. I admire him. And this song of his is something that I like the most, Shades of Grey. So I'm neither trying to be righteous, nor do I know for sure. As far as I know, everything that I know is still shades of gray. Okay, so with that proviso, what I'm going to say today, I hope does not hurt any vegans, animal lovers, vegetarians. Okay? So this talk has been inspired by a couple of different people. One of them is Amber, and we briefly showed her this slide. Amber has a few YouTube videos. But basically what Amber said is that she suffers from depression, bipolar disorder with little mania, but mostly depression. And she had gained 60 pounds despite being on a low-carb diet because she couldn't stick to it. So she was on a low-carb diet, she had lost weight, and she was on that diet since 1999. But in 2008, she found herself at the end of the rope, not doing very well, 60 pounds heavier. And she heard about this group of people who were following what is called a carnivorous diet. They call it the ASF group, the Animal Sourced Food Group. So she said, what the heck, I got nothing to lose. The carnivorous diet is very similar to the induction phase of an Atkins diet. I don't know if any of you tried Atkins diet, but in the beginning, you kind of vamp down the carbohydrates a lot and you eat a lot of meat-based products. So she lost about 60 pounds, but what she found is that her mood got stable. She had mood stability, so she came for the weight loss, but she still maintains the carnivorous diet, not just because of weight loss, but because of mood stability. So I want to kind of explore this a little bit with all of you guys, and I'm going to present a lawyerly argument in front of you as to why some of this is actually true and why, as humans, we should look at our diet very carefully in terms of what we were meant to eat. Okay? So when you look at humans, they have this enormous brain size. Their gut size is relatively small, and if you look at the whole size of the human, you would expect that the gut would be much larger and that the brain would be much smaller. So the important question is, why do humans have such a large brain, and why do they have a relatively smaller gut? So what I'm going to say to you is that this is millions of years of evolution, and you can see that the size of the human brain is increasing, and there was an inflection point about 2 million years ago, at which time our brain was only about 500 cc's. Now from 500 cc's it went to 1500 cc's, so it tripled in size in a short period of time. So the question is, why did the brain triple in such a short period of time? And this is where we were about 35,000 years ago. This is where we are right now. Our brain has shrunk by about 12%, 11 to 12% in the last 35 years. And it's interesting to find out why that has happened. So the larger brain and a smaller gut requires one very important factor. In other words, if you have a larger brain and a smaller gut, what does the gut need to do? So I'm asking these questions because I don't want you guys to sleep today. So the gut needs to be very good at absorbing nutrients. It needs to be good at absorbing food. Okay? So in order to absorb nutrients to supply our brain with energy, the food has to be of high quality. Okay, so dietary quality of food has to be very high. So when you compare the size of the human brain, it's much larger than that of our ape ancestors, much larger than that of the other mammals. And then there's very, very important aspect, and this is called the expensive tissue hypothesis. Expensive tissue hypothesis meaning that our brain is very expensive in terms of energy. And this was looked at by a couple of anthropologists, Elilio and Wheeler. And what they said is that our anthropod primate cousins use about 8% of their energy to supply their brain. But how much do you think we use? So if we have a resting energy expenditure of about 2,000 calories, how many of those calories do you think our brain needs per day? 25%. See, I was just making sure that you guys were paying attention. So about 400 calories are needed by the brain. The brain is 2% of your body mass, 2%, yet it uses between 20 and 25% of your calories. Okay, so now this is the digestive tract of different animals. The human is out here. What is shown in pink here is called the fermenting vat. Okay, so I said fermenting vat. So a fermenting vat means that that is the organ that takes food and with the aid of microorganisms like bacteria, it converts the food to energy. Okay? So which organism out here has the smallest fermenting vat? Humans. So humans have the smallest amount of microorganisms in their gut compared to the koala bear, compared to our ancestors who were primates. This is a comparison of how the human gut is compared to our primate ancestors, right? So the size of our stomach is about the same as the rest of the chimpanzees and gorillas, but we have a much larger, smaller bowel. So there is stomach, the duodenum, and the small intestines. The small intestines absorb nutrients. And when you compare the size of our colon, the colon is about 10% the size of our primate herbivorous ancestors. Okay, so I'll say that again. Primate herbivorous ancestors. So who is a herbivore? Do you guys know what a herbivore is? Plant-eating animal. What is cecum? I had shown you cecum up here, and I said the cecum is a fermenting vat. And if you look at our cecum, is it very large or is it non-existent? It's sort of non-existent. All right, so I don't know if many of you can see the slide, but I want to summarize that for you. The colon size of our primate ancestors is about 50%. Our colon size is about 19%, and this is not normalized to body size because humans are much larger than some of our primate ancestors. So when you normalize it to the size of the animal, it's only about 10%, whereas we have very large small intestines compared to our ancestors in our evolution. So I want to ask you guys an important question. There are different types of digestive systems, right? Digestion based on eating grass and plant food, and digestion based on acid production in the stomach. So this slide is just meant to convey that impression. So what is our digestion based on? So acid production in the stomach. So keep that acid production in the stomach in the back of your mind. But right now, I want to discuss what is called the ruminants. Okay? So what is a ruminant? Excellent. So grass-eating animals with multiple stomachs. So this happens to be sheep, cattle, cows, goats. So if you look at their stomach, they have 4 stomachs. Something that comes in, a rumen. And what is this rumen out here? It's a fermenting vat. The reason I say that is that it has bacteria in it. So when this animal is eating, it is chewing repeatedly that food, getting out here, and let me go to that of a cow. The esophagus, this, all of this in the abdominal cavity is what? That is the stomach. Those are the 4 chambers of the stomach. So why does a ruminant have such a large stomach?
Not much energy, grass.
So the reason they have such a large stomach is because they are eating low quality forage. By low quality forage, I don't mean to pass a value judgment on the food that they eat, but they're basically eating grass, right? Okay? Can humans eat grass, or can humans eat fiber and get all the energy? We can't. Why can they get energy from fiber? Can mammals, can they actually digest fiber? Can the cows? So the cows themselves, like you say yes, and that's partly correct. The cows themselves cannot digest the fiber. They need the bacteria in their stomach to digest the fiber. So the bacteria in their stomach convert the fiber to what? Now I'm just showing you different parts of the stomach, the reticulum, the rumen, where there is fermentation going on, and then out here, which is basically grinding the food, which is the omosum, and then sometimes the animal takes it back into the mouth, chews it again, and sends it back because it wants to expose the cell wall. It wants to chew it in such a way that it is exposing the cell wall so that the bacteria can digest it. And then something that resembles our stomach. And basically an herbivore is eating low quality forage. It's mostly fiber. They are called foregut fermenters because they are fermenting in their stomach. And they have bacteria, and this was a big surprise to me. The bacteria convert the fiber to fat. So in other words, an animal that's a ruminant can eat grass and can get fat. Because when they eat grass, they're eating fiber, but they're really not eating fiber, they're eating fat. Because the bacteria convert it to fat. And they convert it to short chain fatty acids, which is by fermenting fiber, and they get fat while eating grass, and this is because their digestive system is very different from that of humans. Humans cannot digest fiber. They don't have a fermenting vat, whereas the ruminants do. Now I put up a horse as a representative of what is called a hind gut fermenter. The horse has a monogastric stomach, it has a simple stomach, but it is not fermenting in the stomach, it is fermenting after the small intestines in that cecum. So this is a hind gut fermenter, and we don't have a cecum, so our fermenting capacity is limited to the colon, and our colon is only about 10%. So I said when we do digestive system comparisons, the way humans digest food is that they cannot digest fiber, which is cellulose. Their digestion is dependent predominantly on acid, which is used to break down protein. They can also use fat and absorb fat in the small intestines, and they don't really use the microbes to get any energy. So our colon is only 10%. So if you're eating a large amount of fiber, you're not getting any energy from it. All right, so I'm coming back to what I told you about human digestion, which is acid-based. This is a study that is published. I put it up here, the reference to it. And what he found is that humans out here have a very acidic pH. So in this study, he found a pH of a little over 2. There are other studies that have found that humans have a stomach pH of about 1.5, whereas other primates have a pH of about 6. So let me ask you this, what does a low pH mean? Does a low pH mean high acid or low acid? So lower the pH, higher the acid. So the question that comes about is that, why do we need acid in the stomach? So when we eat protein, the protein needs to be broken down, and protein is essential for our health. And what starts the process of processing protein is acid. Acid digests the protein. There is another reason why our body makes acid, and that is that the food that we eat, is that sterile or is it full of microbes?
Microbes.
So it's full of bacteria. What kills those bacteria? It is the stomach acid that kills the bacteria. Okay, I have another important question. The stomach produces an enzyme called pepsin. So our stomach is producing acid, and it's also producing pepsin. What does pepsin do? So pepsin is fundamentally needed to break down protein to amino acids so that we can absorb them. The pepsin does not get activated if you don't have an acidic environment. Okay, so when you have a large amount of weight, what do? Let's say your BMI is over 40 or 45, and you have been trying and dieting and you cannot lose weight, so you go in and you do what? You get gastric bypass surgery. What happens to your stomach size? It gets much smaller. What happens to your acid production? It gets less, reduced. So some people who go through gastric bypass surgery or who reduce the size of their stomach are in extreme and severe danger of nutrient malabsorption. They may not absorb iron, they may not absorb vitamin B12, they become anemic, they may need supplementation. Okay, what is another very good way of reducing acid production that is being done commonly by physicians, by many of the people, by looking at the TV ads and stuff like that? So Nexium, proton pump inhibitors. So when you take a proton pump inhibitor, you reduce acid. When you reduce acid, for sure you are preventing absorption of protein and many important nutrients. So just not that, but you prevent calcium absorption causing osteoporosis. You can get low iron and vitamin B12, you can get kidney disease, you are at higher risk of cancers. But also very importantly, our stomach is a sterile environment. Our stomach is not supposed to have bacteria. How can you increase the bacteria in your stomach? What can you do to increase the bacteria in your stomach? Reduce your acid production. How do you reduce your acid production? Through using proton pump inhibitors or getting your stomach cut out. So for people, this is an important point that I want to give you. For people in this room who are on proton pump inhibitors, you need to have a very serious discussion with your primary physician or with your gastroenterologist who put you on them to see how soon and how effectively you can get off of them. Okay? Okay, so I took some of these slides from Amber Owen, and humans eat meat because meat is nutritionally very dense. It gives us all the nutrients that we need in a much better way than any plant, vegetable, or fruits that we can eat, because we have an enormous brain that requires energy, and that's what happened to us when our brain increased in size from 500 cc's to 1500 cc's. We needed energy dense food because we had smaller gut and a larger brain. So we traded the intestinal tissue for brain tissue at that time, and we had one very important aspect that happened to us, and that is that we lost the ability to ferment fiber into fat. Okay, so when I tell my patients that, hey, I used to tell you eat a lot of fiber, but now I'm not so crazy about fiber. That right now I want to tell you that the nutritionally most effective food for you is meat, whether it's from beef or goat, or whether it is chicken or fish or eggs, or coming from cheese and other types of fats. So during this evolutionary period, we needed protein and energy, and we couldn't get this from fiber. Plants were available at that time, so at the time when our brain was increasing in size, it was apparently the Ice Age. And in that time, the plants that were available were too fibrous to provide us with the enough energy to supply our brain, and they were very low in protein. Now, when I tell people that the protein that is found in plants is not very bioavailable, like let's say somebody goes in and has a bunch of nuts which has protein, and somebody has meat which also has protein, which one is more bioavailable? Meat. Why is the protein from nuts not bioavailable? The reason is because it's encased in cellulose. Cellulose is fiber, so the body needs to get rid of the fiber first before it gets to the protein. So if you eat nuts, you might be able to absorb about 60 to 70% of the protein, whereas if you eat meat, you can get about 95 to 97% of protein that will get absorbed. Also, if they had fruits or vegetables, they were seasonal, and also because Ice Age, they were very limited. But apparently at that time, when our brain was increasing in size, there was what is called the megafauna. Megafauna was these large animals that were extremely fatty. But this megafauna disappeared as time went by, and our modern hunter-gatherers had to deal with more leaner game. Okay, so there is an argument that meat is nutrient sufficient, but when I tell people that hey, meat supplies all the B vitamins, supplies iron, supplies zinc, supplies short chain fatty acids, supplies omega-3 fatty acids, they say if we don't eat plants, we won't get vitamin C and we will get sick. If we don't eat plants, if we don't eat vegetable matters, we won't get vitamin C and we'll get sick. So I want to tell you a story about, I'll have to get back at these slides, got a little bit out of sequence, of Wilmar Swenson. How many of you guys know Wilmar Swenson? So Wilmar Swenson was a guy who was living in the early 1900s. He was an Arctic explorer. There's a stamp out of him. He wrote this book called Not by Bread Alone. And he went and lived with the Inupiat Indians, with the Eskimos, for several years. And what do the Eskimos eat? Meat. So they eat either whale blubber or whatever it's fat. They eat caribou that they respect and worship, and they eat salmon. They eat almost no vegetation. So they subsist entirely on a diet that is composed of animal products. So he lived with them, and when he came back, he met with several physicians, scientists, and he said that my experience with the Inupiats is very important because the way modern world is progressing in eating processed and industrialized food is wrong. By eating meat alone, you can get all the nutrients that you need. So he was roundly criticized, ridiculed, until he made them do what is called the Bellevue Experiment. So this is an actual experiment that you can Google and find. So what happened is that he said that my idea of diet should be taken in the realms of theory and folklore and put into the field of common sense and practical experience. He never got around to writing this book, but he convinced a group of people, including the American Meat Institute, to do an experiment. And what that experiment was that he and one of his colleagues went on a year of exclusive meat diet. So they said, no, this is not possible, you're going to cheat. So he was hospitalized in the Bellevue hospital for 1 year. The food that he ate was regimented. It was only meat alone. He ate nothing other than meat. A little salt and a little butter. Meat, salt and butter for 1 year. So at the end of that, the physician Lee pointed out that my period of exclusive meat diet for a total of about 9 years, during this, my sense of physical and mental well-being was at its best. So he just didn't do it for a year. He just continued doing it for 9 years, during which time Dr. Lieb was observing him. And then he said, with this information, I agreed with Dr. Lieb, because the summary of 7 years following the Bellevue year coincides with my opinion that continued for another 30 years. So for 30 years, he ate a meat alone diet and lived healthily. Okay. Okay, so when you eat animal sourced food, you say that, hey, there are certain important nutrients that you get that you cannot get from any other source. That means plants are incapable of supplying these in sufficient quantities for humans. One of them is iron. I'll talk a little bit more about iron in detail. Another is zinc. The zinc that is found in meats is much more bioavailable than the one that is found in plants. I will talk a little bit more about DHA. How many of you have come to my clinic? Many of you, right? To how many of you have we said you needed to take krill oil? Okay, so what does krill oil contain?
Omega-3.
So it contains omega-3. One of the omega-3 in that is DHA. So I'm going to expand on that a little bit. Now, many of us think that beta-carotene that is found in plants is a sufficient source of vitamin A, right? The body takes beta-carotene and converts it to vitamin A. Yes? So if you look at the literature carefully, you will find that plant-based food has beta-carotene, but our conversion of beta-carotene to vitamin A is not very good. So the best source of vitamin A comes from animal-sourced food. Same is the case with vitamin D and iodine. So let's explore a few things more carefully. So heme iron is absorbed by specific receptors, and these are called heme iron receptors. So when you talk about iron, the best source of iron is meat. Why is that? Because meat contains myoglobin. Myoglobin has iron inside it in the form of heme, and our body has a receptor to absorb heme iron. Okay? Plant sources, do they contain heme iron? They don't contain heme iron. So when you take iron from plant sources, it's not very bioavailable. In other words, you don't absorb the iron that you're getting from plant sources, whereas the absorption of iron from heme iron is much better. So cultures and people who are vegan, who are truly vegan for long periods of time, can get iron deficiency. Okay? And this is showing you that the heme iron has a specific receptor in the intestines, which is another indication that our biology, as biological evolution, we were designed to use animal-based food. Okay, now what about B12? So vitamin B12 many people get, and vitamin B12 needs an acidic stomach for it to get activated, because the acidic stomach activates a certain factor in our stomach which binds to vitamin B12 that again subsequently gets absorbed in the small intestines. So vitamin B12, is it found in plant-based food? So in other words, if you are a complete vegan, you don't eat any animal-based food, will you get vitamin B12? No, because vitamin B12 is almost exclusively an animal-based food. Okay? So this is an experiment, and you see the by Dong and Scott, and they found that vegans had a low amount of vitamin B12. Normal value is greater than 200, Lacto-vegetarians, people who ate milk and cheese, had slightly higher. Lacto-ovo-vegetarians were no different. Semi-vegetarians were better, and non-vegetarians were the best. So again, this is another indication that through evolution, humans were designed to eat meat. Okay? Now you've heard about omega-3 and omega-6, and I want to pause here and tell you, if you have come to any of these previous seminars, what have I told you about corn oil, sunflower oil, safflower oil, all the vegetable oils? They're not good. Why are they not good? Omega-6. Good. What I want to tell you is that these oils are extracted at very high temperature. They're highly processed. They're not just cold pressed like olive oil is cold pressed out of the seed. So these are either extracted in solvents, so you take this corn and you put it in a solvent and you extract the oil and then you heat it up to get the solvent out of it. So these are highly processed oils that are very bad for you. So if anything you take out of this, don't go back home and ever cook in vegetable oil. Okay, don't go back home and ever cook in vegetable oil. So all these oils are high in omega-6. Now I've put flaxseed oil, and the rest of it is basically animal products. There is some olive oil in here. So I want to focus on flaxseed oil and olive oil, but mostly flaxseed oil. Now I used to come here and tell you that have flaxseed, chia seeds, and hemp seeds because it's high in omega-3. Okay, I used to say that. As my knowledge advances, I learn new things, I want to pass it on, and my viewpoint changes as I learn more things. So now I'm coming here and telling you that, yeah, these oils may be good, and flaxseed may be good, and hemp seed may be good, and chia seed may be good, but I don't want you to depend on the omega-3 that it has. It's plant-based omega-3. Okay? So plant-based omega-3 starts out as ALA. Okay? So this ALA in the body needs to be converted through certain enzymes to EPA and DHA. So EPA and DHA are the final forms of omega-3 that our body uses, and the process of converting plant-based omega-3 to the omega-3 that our body uses is highly inefficient. So less than 5% of plant-based omega-3 that you are eating will get converted to the important kinds of omega-3 that our body can use. And the DHA that our body needs really can only be obtained from animal food. And it's important for the function of the heart, the function of the brain, and contribution to normal brain development, the size of brain. So I want to pause here and then give you a speculation, a hypothesis that I think is happening. Is in the last 10,000 years, humans have shifted from a diet that was predominantly meat and animal based to a diet that is more and more based on agriculture and plant-based food. So what has happened to the important nutrients that our body needed that we cannot utilize from plants? Did it go down or go up? It went down. Do you think that could be a possibility for the reduction in human brain size in the last 10,000 years? DHA is a very important source for normal brain function. And when you look at DHA, all of us are a little different at converting the animal-based omega-3 to DHA. Let me say that again. All of us are a little different. I may be a little worse, you may be a little better, and Amber O'Hearn may be pretty bad at converting ALA, which is the omega-3 of plant-based, to the DHA, which our body needs. And that may be a reason why her brain function improved. That may be a reason why her mood stability improved. So the whole reason for explaining this to you is that animal-based food is highly important so far as I have told you to absorb zinc, iron, vitamin B12, and omega-3 fatty acids. So USDA told us that don't eat saturated fat and cholesterol. And saturated fat and cholesterol are really the ones that can be found in animal-based food. So in the US, because of the recommendations of the American Heart and the USDA, we have reduced the consumption of animal-based food, and we are eating predominantly a vegetable-based food, much to the detriment of our health. And you would be surprised that this recommendation to reduce saturated fat and cholesterol is not really based on any evidence. I would challenge anybody, any physician, to come here and tell me that eating saturated fat and cholesterol leads to heart disease. There is no evidence showing that. Now, okay, I want to tell you one other thing about the hunter-gatherers, and that is that there are many of these hunter-gatherers that were reviewed by a gentleman by the name of Weston Price. So today is a historical day. I'm going to tell you about Wilmar Swenson and Weston Price. How many of you know about Weston Price? There's a couple of you. So Weston Price was this dentist in the early 1900s, and he traveled all over the place, and he studied cultures that were living in isolation, and he looked at their dietary pattern, their dentition, their health. And he found in all the tribes that he looked at that there was not a single tribe that was subsisting that was not eating animal-based food. So in other words, if you don't eat animal-based food, you cannot survive. The reason vegans are capable of surviving in this day and age is because of supplements. The supplements give them B12, the supplements give them omega-3, the supplements give them